Welcome to Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and on last month's Simply Sewing episode, we covered pattern pieces. Well, there was a lot of questions about notches, so let's cover those questions and get those answers. The first thing is, what is a notch? A notch is a series of little triangles on your pattern pieces. It can have one little triangle, 2, 3, 4, or more. Those little notches are like puzzle pieces, and they need to match together as we are sewing the garment together. And each size will have their own matching notches. So if I'm cutting out the smaller size, these two notches will match together, just like you're going to do a puzzle. The next size will go together, and so on. If you have been sewing for a long time, you might have been taught to snip those notches out. As we're cutting out the pattern, when we get to that notch, we're going to duplicate that shape from the outside, and it will just become a larger shape. And then continue cutting your pattern out. This is a very standard way of cutting out a notch. So the size inside is going to be duplicated outside. And we would do that on all pieces. When all the notches are cut out this way, you will be able to match up those notches, and that keeps the fabric in the right spot as we're sewing. Then we can stitch that 5/8 seam allowance and sew the garment together. Cutting the notches out into the seam allowance is a method that has been done for years, which is a great method. However, it does have a disadvantage. If you like to finish the edges of your garment first before you sew it together, if you finish the edges with a serge stitch, this is going to get cut right off, which means we no longer have that mark that we need. If we finish the edge with a zigzag stitch, it's the same thing. What's going to happen is we can lose this mark. So if you like to finish the edges of your fabric first, it will be more difficult having those notches on the outside. If you're stitching a 5/8 seam allowance, you're going to be able to take that notch and cut it inside within that seam allowance. You want to leave enough space so that you can do the stitching, but you can cut that inside. After the edges have been finished, you're going to see that little notch inside still within that seam allowance that you'll be able to use for marking. Another common way is to mark them instead of cutting them. I can still have that 5/8 seam allowance and just have that mark come within that seam allowance. And with those markings visible under that seam allowance, we're still going to be able to match up our pieces and stitch that 5/8 seam allowance along the edge. So depending on how you want to finish your garment, you're going to be able to use one of these three methods for the notches. We can have the notch that's stitched out, the notch that's stitched in, or we can mark the notch. It's all up to how you are going to finish your garment. So how you mark those notches is really a personal sewing preference. How you sew is really the best way to mark those notches. Thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe, and as always, come on back. Let's see what we're sewing next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.